Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 182 with Shawn Galloway of ProAct Safety. And today we're going to sit down and kind of talk about the marketing of safety. So I really wish we didn't have to sell things, but as safety professionals, we have to sell things because we can't supervise everybody. We got to have a plan, and with that plan, you have to have buy-in. Um, so Sean will sit down and talk to us today and help us out with a couple strategies out there. And this is an area that I struggle with, Sean. So this is really going to be good for me as well, just to really sit down and hear some different strategies on really marketing safety and really getting that word out there. So.
Yeah, I wrote about this in a couple of articles, but we wrote about it extensively in the 2013 book, Steps to Safety Culture Excellence, because if you're looking to improve the culture change happens best from within, not from those outside the culture. And sometimes a safety professional is viewed as outside the culture. Sometimes a
Yes.
CEO is viewed as outside the culture. Sometimes a supervisor is viewed as outside the culture. So when you're looking at culture change, again, this is a specific thread here. You have to look at how best can we create a sense of ownership, kind of Deming's principle of people support what they help to create. So when you look at change, when you look at getting people to adopt change, the first principle to remember is that forced change is almost always temporary. When you and the force go away, so does the change. And if we're going out like the parental, do this because I said so, that people, previous generations were more of a do as you're told type of thing. Somebody in an authoritative position said, this is what we need to do. We're going to march on. We're going to make this happen. Now, people entering into the workforce today are much more interested in the why behind things. And if you look at what really creates resistance to change, which let me put a pin in that for a second, we find, and a lot of research supports this, that people and cultures don't naturally resist change. They resist, again, the force of the change. Cultures and people, individuals, they'll change when the change is easy, when it quickly provides value, they see it beneficial, and it's reinforced and all of that. But there are three things that do trigger people to resist change. Number one, they don't understand it. So we haven't done a good job communicating. Communication is a part of marketing. Number two, they don't like it. And number three, they don't like who's bringing it. So those last two kind of highlight people respond emotionally to change before logically. So if I'm telling you, David, logically, this is why we have to go in this direction. Well, but why though? Is this what's in it for me? That famous radio station, WIIFM.
Yeah.
But what I find is that there are really four areas of marketing that we could leverage. And those are brand, and I'll pause after going through these four to see how it sits with you. But brand, and a brand's how you associate with a product, a service, a person, a company, an EHS team, a safety team. Positioning, how you position that brand in communications. The brand solicits some sort of emotional response when you see a certain brand you really appreciate versus a brand you disdain. Voice of the customer. So we always have to remember employees, supervisors, contractors, visitors on a project are customers and consumers of our safety efforts. They're not problems to be solved. They're some of the best problem solvers because they're closest to the risk. So what's the voice of the customer? Are we doing things that we see value in? And are we doing things they see value in? And finally, reinforcing the buying decision. When you purchase a luxury vehicle, for example, or you decide you want to go on a cruise line or take a particular airline, they try to make you feel good about that purchase after the purchase. So when given the opportunity, hopefully you'll make the buying decision with them again. And the way that I looked at this when I was first researching this about 20 years ago is that if somebody buys into what we're doing and then they go back to work and they're given an extra load because they were away doing something in safety, or they buy into reporting a near miss and something punitive happens to them afterwards, they're not going to want to buy in the future. So how do we reinforce that buy-in coming from marketing, buying, but how do we reinforce that buy-in decision?
Well, those are really good points. And before I really answer it, I think I want to give you a boomer story about when I was just a young safety professional, just fresh out of school.
A
I
few years ago,
literally
right? Just a few years ago.
that's right, yeah, that's right. I literally thought, well, I'm smart, and because I'm going to say something, people will just do it. I really didn't understand the why, so it really took me time to really talk to the people to understand the why. I've never met somebody who wanted to get hurt, but many times when we present programs, much like you said, we're really suffering on why that we're doing this. So, and when you talk about brand, you kind of brought up a very good point. I never really thought of safety as a brand out there, but there are people who probably have not had a positive experience, and thus they don't see the brand as a really good thing. So maybe they're a little bit hesitant anyway to change or even hear that message from you because maybe um like you said, they tried to do the right thing and they ended up with some kind of punitive action. Somebody said, stop chiming in. The safety guy will tackle the safety guy stuff. You worry about working that factory floor, So you bring up a lot of really good points then. And I think I did a great job of dancing around answering your question, too, at the same time. Um, I think it's really important that we sit down and talk to everybody to get their input as much as possible too, because then we're going to get a lot of different perspectives also. And one of the things that I do see that safety people really have a hard time with is because they're juggling a lot of sites, a lot of different projects, and a lot of things is doing that follow up. Going back to the person and say, "Hey, I heard what you said. We're going to execute the following things. Thanks a lot for your input." Because then that's also going to be a ally to really help to get that message out because now it's from them. It's not this nameless, faceless guy who comes down and writes a couple of emails and memos, and now all of a sudden everything has to change because that person showed up. It's that internal change, that organic change that's happening inside. So those are some really good points that you brought up there, Sean.
Yeah, I did military right out of high school, so before university, and then my corporate career began with an engineering firm in England, and then Fleur Daniel recruited me to work for them. And the clients I was primarily working in, especially process engineering, were chemical plants, refineries. As a result, that got me exposed to the systems around hazardous chemicals, which then PSM came out, and that's where I first got my start. So, like you, I
Hmm.
came from the rigidity of if somebody says left face, we would all turn left, or somebody says about we all,
Yep.
or PSM, OSHA says you have to have this management of change. I was used to that. So in 2005, when I was recruited to come to work for ProAct, I became a partner and president in '08 or '09, and then 2021 became the CEO of the company. But when I first came in, I was pretty naive. I thought when it came to all the stuff we do around the journey to excellence and safety, a lot of it had to do with just getting people to care. We just get them to care, then the rest takes care of themselves. Really naive. But it's not until I realized people need to know what to do and then care. So if then we're saying we want them to do something, that's sales. That's really marketing. Whether it's administrative controls, follow this policy, wear this PPE, or even getting a leader to see the value in proactively investing capital in engineering controls or eliminating certain types of hazards by other investments, change in design, et cetera. That's
Right.
all selling them on the idea. So whether it's a tactical, we need to do this, to strategic, this is where we're going, and this is why success is a better place than where we are today, and even selling them on the concept of a new vision for excellence. There are so many organizations I work with that over the last 5 to 10 years, more and more recently, though, are completely moving away from all the language around target zero, zero injuries, and everything. And I wrote an article, it has to have been 10, 12 years ago, purposely trying to disrupt the thinking around that. And it was called Zero Incident Goals Create Risk Taking Cultures. Because as you and I know, when people define success as the absence of injuries, well, then anything I do that doesn't get me hurt must be safe,
Right. It
flawed
must be
logic.
safe.
So that's right. So we have to change the way people think about something. And I can't make you think differently about something. I need to change information and I need to change experiences. So that means we're influential when we're trying to get people to do what they want. But like you mentioned in brand, a lot of great safety professionals don't really look at that brand. They don't really look at how they're perceived. And that's really what it is. And it begins with, how do I want to be perceived? Terry Mathis, who started our company, and he retired in 21. But Terry and I were sitting around his breakfast table probably 15, 16 years ago. And we had this conversation about our firm and ourselves. How do we want to be perceived? And then it's, what do we need to do to create those perceptions? And that led to the books, the keynotes, and all the other stuff that we've done over the years. But it starts with identifying how you want to be perceived. And I'll give you two quick little stories. One organization that later on, a few years later, ended up becoming listed in the CEOs That Get It, National Safety Council's Safety and Health Magazine
Mm-hmm.
publication. I don't know if it was because of what this leader Scott did, but it was pretty brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted his group, which was environmental health and safety and sustainability at the time, he wanted that group to be perceived as a strategic ally and a strategic advisor to operations, not the grunt work, not the busy work, not the people that come in to try to shut you down or stop you from acquisitions and all of that. Strategic advisor. So he thought of the concept of a chess piece, and then he rearranged the acronym to spell out corporate, health, environmental, safety, and sustainability. Chess. And he looked at
Oh.
how he positioned that. I don't remember what was it, a bishop. I don't remember what the chess piece was. It was quite a long time ago. But he would position that in key visual areas of the organization and in corporate communications. And it's a bit of a subconscious play there. You never really know of subconscious types of efforts what really yields a change in things. But over the next few years, he and his team behaved congruent with the perception they were trying to create. So I'm sure there's a multitude of things that over time they became viewed as a strategic ally. And he went from a couple of rungs below the CEO to reporting directly to the CEO. And as you and I know, where the head of all the decisions from a technical acumen and a strategic acumen and safety resides in the organization truly shows how the organization perceives the importance of safety. So one other quick, that was a bit longer, but one other quick story. A group in Oregon, they read the STEPS book and they named a methodology that they were deploying at their plant, STEP. And I think it was safety through employee participation. A lot of acronyms in
Oh, okay.
safety. We kind of joke that there's not enough acronyms in safety, so we'll stay up late at night to develop new ones to confuse the world.
Right.
But it was like safety through employee participation, STEP. And they shared with me some of the things that they were doing to affect change and performance and culture. And it was some pretty impressive things that they were doing. So they wanted me to come in and kind of give them some feedback on the efficacy of their choices. And one of the first things I wanted to do when I arrived at the plant was talk to some of the customers of this change initiative, employee supervisors, because the team wasn't monitoring their brand of STEP, which also includes the voice of the customer piece I talked about. How effective are we perceived? The workforce had renamed STEP to safety through eating pizza. That's all they saw they ever did.
Right,
So they had a
exactly.
brand problem and had to change that brand.
Right, right, right. Yes, I have run into folks who didn't have a very positive outlook on safety, and not that they ever had a real negative interaction, but it was kind of more that, like you said, that people would show up and say, "Hey, I got some food. So here's what we're going to talk about today." And it would almost be like, "Well, wait a minute, didn't we have something the kind of similar 2 or 3 months back?" It was almost like they were taking a shotgun and shooting a target, and like something is going to stick eventually, and that's going to be what drives us to be safe. But they just didn't really have a strategy, and so they had a brand issue. Is that people knew that, okay, so they're coming in 2 weeks, that means that we're going to have to do something different. But that also means that at least we get to go to the office and sit in the AC and have a donut, at least, if nothing else. So they just kind of saw it as, well, whatever they say, it's not going to stick. They'll just change it in 2 or 3 months. It'll be something else here soon. So it's really hard to have that buy-in also when it's forced on you, and also knowing that history has taught you that it'll just be different anyway here soon.
Well, imagine if companies
Mhm.
acted that way. Well, we don't really have a strategy. We make some products and eventually the customers will buy, right? I mean,
That's right.
we're going to be so impressive. Everyone's going to want our products and services. We have to look at it. We have to really look at it the same way. But like you're saying,
Mhm,
if we're doing things that are non-value added, or we're doing things that are confusing or disengage or demotivate people,
mhm.
one popular story we used to tell, it was an offshore platform in the Gulf of Mexico, and the topic that month on safety was lawnmower maintenance.
Mhm.
The guys weren't going home after their hitches and mowing lawns and all of that.
Right.
But the other side to this is I have a friend that works for one of the major oil and gas companies, and they were doing some team building exercises. And my friend here in the Houston area wears long pants, wears all the full PPE when it's 100 degrees and 95% humid. So he buys into the safety culture of this organization.
Yeah.
Team building exercise. They decided to go bowling, and as they were sitting there shaking hands, nice to meet you, because they're reorging, bringing people from around the world to this new location. They were then stopped by the department head and said, wait, before you go pick out your bowling balls, we need to fill out a job safety analysis form. Immediately causing my friend who was bought in, how out of touch with reality is this? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier.
Mhm.
We have to be thinking strategically, and marketing is a key piece of that. Are we doing things that are of the most value? And the things that we're doing, do people see value in? If we're not on either one of those, we're losing. And strategy is about winning, it's about value creation.
Right. And I think the one thing that I've tried, and I'm not sure that I've been 100% successful in it, is to have a system where we sit down, assess risk, because you obviously can't do everything, every single day. And you say, so how do I go back and get the most bang for the buck? Because a lot of times you travel between multiple sites and you got other things happening. So you have to have a system to say what you will and what you will not address. And it doesn't mean that it's not important. There's just things that are more important that have to be addressed at the same time.
Yeah, I tend to prioritize when we're looking at initiatives on effort and impact, and then high, medium, or low. But
Ooh, I
excuse
like
me,
that. Mhm.
the other thing is if it's your idea, it's your idea. And if it's other people's idea, it's their idea. And back to that ownership in the idea.
Right.
But if you and I were in a silo to create a plan, a strategy, whatever it is, it's always going to be an awkward fit to the business, because business leaders and potential stakeholders, consumers, should play a role in the development of the strategy. But if people don't see the value in what we're doing, then we're back to that disengagement point that we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
So when you look at prioritization, I leverage the term decision qualifiers. So what's going to qualify that decision? And I find, because I've developed more strategy and looked at more strategy than anyone, I find there's really three.
Hmm.
You have to have a very clear vision of what success is going to look like. And it's not the absence of failures, it's the presence of controls, it's the presence of capacity. It's also what would our culture look like. So you
Right.
have to have that well defined. So the first decision qualifier is, hey, we're thinking about going in this reaction, or we've had an incident, knee jerk react, we should do this. Number
Mhm.
one, does this get us closer to our vision? Number two, then, is once you have strategic priorities identified, thrusts, buckets of responsibility, whatever it is, improving safety communication could be a strategic priority. Does this initiative action support one of these strategic priorities? And then number three, does data support this decision? Because a lot of opinions drive that, but also a
Mhm.
corporation can have a strategy, but a site needing to meet their people where they're at on the safety journey might need to do something incongruent with the corporate strategic directives, because data shows this is something we need to do. The patient is bleeding. We have to triage this right now. It's not time to be decorating, the rooms. We have to deal with these issues here. So when it comes to prioritization, those are some of the tools that I use.
Right. I really like that. Could you do that one more time about the um
Effort and impact.
Yeah. Because I really like that, and I liked how you can sit down and say that you can't get everything done. So here's your effort and here's your impact. You know.
Everybody does. Every single time I've developed, whether it's a location, a project up to a corporation, everybody front end loads on the first year. So
Mhm.
most of them I do in person versus virtually. But
Mhm.
I have butcher paper on the wall, and I have year one, or it could be 2025, and then I have the next subsequent years on other pieces of paper, and then I'll use things like 3x5 cards to put the actual action on there. So that
Mhm.
can be peeled off and placed wherever we think it's going to go.
Mhm.
And then we'll prioritize them based on what's the level of effort. How much bandwidth is this going to take? If this is
Exactly.
quickly updating a procedure that's not a key operational procedure, that's relatively quickly, low effort, right?
Right.
But then we also look at impact. Okay, if we do that, it's also not going to have much impact. So you'd have an L and an L.
Mhm.
And I like to do that because then holistically, when you're looking at all of the things that you think need to be done or also stop doing, sometimes the safe choice is not the easy choice because we make things so cumbersome and difficult. So sometimes strategy just as much as what are we not going to do or stop doing. But once
Right.
you look at, and even stopping doing something comes with a level of effort and
Mhm.
impact on that. But I like doing that myself because then everybody can visually see where we're at and every time how we front end loaded. So some of the language I use in these workshops is what can we really do really well this year? Because I would rather we hit 2 or 3 home runs than just put 16 people on bases and not hit any home runs throughout the game or throughout the year, because then we've overpromised and underdelivered, and then our brand gets compromised.
Right. I really well. So trying to think how to ask this question. How do you tackle the whole? I tell you what, I shouldn't ask this question because I don't have it clear enough in my head to ask this question then. But I really like how you sat down and also talked about what should you not do, you know. So I think that I've done a couple things for optics over the years, and when I sat back and I thought about it, I'm like, well, it feels good to get a victory, but that was very low effort, very low impact. It feels good to knock something off of the to-do list, but was it really something that literally had to be done now? It has to be done, but does it have to be done now? No.
Well, hindsight's 2020, and all of us and anyone listening to this, if you go back to probably, especially if we're biological males, at least,
Hmm.
looking or answering this question,
Hmm.
probably look at somewhere around our teenage years. We'll probably reflect on something and say, "What in the world was I thinking?" But it made sense at the time.
Oh, yes,
Especially for us
exactly.
males,
Yeah,
tend to be a
exactly.
little bit more risk takers like that. But
Yeah.
hindsight's 2020, and so you're always going to Monday morning quarterback these types of things. But at the time, I find you get better at being strategic when you're thinking about value, and that goes into having a balanced scorecard for our safety efforts and our results. And and you should have really 3 areas. Terry wrote a piece many years ago that said the world's 3 dimensional. Our measurements should be 3 dimensional. I like how he said that.
Oh.
But also, if you think about oil and gas, you have upstream, midstream, and downstream. So
Mhm.
the upstream are typically your leading indicators. And in most organizations, leading indicators are activity based, initiative based. And on the other side of it, the refineries, if you will, we brought the oil out of the ground, we took them through the pipes in midstream, and now we're refining. On the downstream side of things, those are our lagging indicators. But what tends to happen without an effective scorecard with that middle piece is we did this, we had better results, therefore we had better results because we did this. Let's do more. And then it becomes more safety is better versus better safety. So that third piece,
Mhm.
the midstream, if you will, I've used a couple of different terms over the years, transformational indicators.
Ah.
I tend to use more often nowadays because it means a little bit more to people easy in an easier way. Value-based measurements. If we do this, what's the value that explains the improvement or lack of improvement in the results?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
that middle piece there, and it's very hard to land on that. And I've developed lots and lots of scorecards. And in general, the average pace of change for the average corporation, it typically takes about 3, 4, 5 years to really identify what that is, because we perceive what we're trying to do. And if we've had results, that correlation causation trap, or if not, then we second guess. But it also may just be taking time. So let's look at communication. What do we want someone to know, think, feel, believe, or do as a result of this communication? So we did all this communication and safety improvement occurred, but what if we start measuring the stickiness or the return on attention of that? So we talked about all this
Ah,
stuff, and a few months later, nobody remembers what we talked about, but we had improvement. Is that Hawthorne effect? And it also helps us start to realize how sustainable are our great results. Because I've seen a lot of companies accidentally hit 0 injuries at the end of the year, not intentionally. They're a
oh,
little bit luckier over time.
yes, 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 yes. I really like that buy-in piece too. Then I really like that a lot. And you're definitely right about hitting a zero incident by sheer accident. So I know that I can have my eyes closed and walk across the city street, and most times everybody stops for me. Eventually I'm going to get hit, of course, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I made it across the street by accident, not because I was, brilliant and had plans in place or anything else. So Sean, it looks like we are bumping up on time. Could you tell the folks how to connect and catch up with you for more info?
Absolutely. Easy to find. If you type my name in the internet, I'm pretty easy to find. Sean Galloway, SHAWN, Galloway.com. You can find me there. I'm on X, I almost said Twitter. I'm on X, Facebook,
Mhm.
LinkedIn, all of the social platforms. But yeah, absolutely. If there's anything I could help anybody with, point them to any resources. Obviously, I'm a speaker, expert witness, consultant,
Mhm.
as far as what I do to create value and everything. But if there's any of these topics that Dave and I have talked about here today that somebody has some interest in, I'd be more than happy to try to point you to some additional resources.
Awesome, Sean. Thank you so much. And episode 182 is complete. Everybody have a great day.